O tihei mori ora, he mihi ana ngā mana whenua ki tēnei takiwā, ka runaka o tākou, pukitaraki, moiraki o tākou whānui katoa, tēnā koutou, kia ora koutou katoa. E ngā mana e ngā reo a rangatira mā, tēnā koutou, kia ora koutou katoa. Ko Grant Robertson tako ingoa, ko na tumu whakarai ki o tākou whakaihu waka. Nau mai haere mai ki tēnei whakanui ki Conor. Greetings everybody, welcome. I'm Grant Robertson, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Otago, and it gives me enormous pleasure to welcome all of you here tonight for the inaugural professorial lecture of Professor Conor O'Kane. I want to acknowledge up the front with Conor as Deputy Vice-Chancellor Pacific, Professor Diane Sika-Pautonu, Professor Sarah Walton, acting PVC Commerce, as she told me, for one more day. Clearly loving the role, and Professor Fiona Edgar, all from the Department of Management there. I want to acknowledge all of you for coming along tonight. This is a very, very special occasion for the university and obviously for Conor and his family. Becoming a professor is the pinnacle moment in the career of many academics. And at the University of Otago, the tradition of an inaugural professorial lecture to celebrate that is an incredibly important moment. We are recognising excellence across all spheres of being an academic when it comes time to become a professor. That means excellence in research, in teaching and in service. And Conor O'Kane has exemplified all of those attributes. We have an order of events, and so I won't say much more than that because I'll steal Fiona's thunder, but suffice to say that it is for us an absolute honour and a privilege, Conor, to be here tonight to celebrate you and your work. One of the things I think is very important to note, anyone who devotes themselves to a career in academia and a career that leads to a professorial role is making sacrifices along the way. And those sacrifices often fall on the families of our academics. And so I do want to acknowledge in the room tonight Kelly, who I know many of you in the audience know well, and also Conor and Kelly's children, Albie and Bonnie, who are at the front here looking like they're really getting ready for a professorial lecture accompanied by crayons and books. The rest of you who want those, perhaps you could come in and ask. But Kelly and Albie and Bonnie, thank you for your sacrifices in supporting Conor to get to this point. I also want to acknowledge online Conor's parents Michael and Evelyn, sisters Emma and Maeve, brother Kieran and other friends from Ireland who are joining us this evening. Felksha, welcome, no mai. You are very welcome to join us online and in person. But I would like you all to acknowledge today the family that have supported Conor along the way and show our appreciation to them. It's now my privilege to hand over to Professor Fiona Edgar, who will formally introduce Conor and the IPL. Kia ora koutou katoa.
Vice-Chancellor, tēnā koe. Professor O'Kane, tēnā koe. Deputy Vice-Chancellor Pacific, tēnā koe. Professor Walton, tēnā koe. Kelly, Albie and Bonnie, and also local friends of Conor's who are in the room with us, tēnā koutou. Online, I would also like to welcome Conor's parents, Michael and Evelyn, and sisters Emma and Maeve, and brother Kieran, along Conor with some of your nearest and dearest friends from Ireland, tēnā koutou. Friends and colleagues in the room with us today, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Fiona toko ingoa. I have the privilege of being a professor in the Department of Management and the Division of Commerce, the department in which Conor is housed. And I was the head of department for management at the time Conor was appointed to professor. It is my absolute pleasure to warmly welcome you all here today to Professor O'Kane's inaugural professorial lecture. Conor was promoted to professor in February of this year, and tonight we come together to celebrate this achievement. Growing up in Cork, Ireland, Conor attended University College where he completed a Bachelor of Science, and he then went on to the National University of Ireland in Galway to complete a Masters in Business Studies and also his PhD. Conor's PhD was titled Top Management Leadership in the Turnaround Process, and his thesis examined the role of top management leaders in formulating and executing company turnarounds. This work was quite seminal and it led to the development of a turnaround leadership process model. After graduating with his PhD, Professor O'Kane worked as a business development officer in Ireland before coming to the University of Otago, where he was appointed as a lecturer in 2011. Conor is very social, so it wasn't long before he'd made friends with colleagues within the university and also locals around the town. And as the Irish might say, Conor is all about the crack. And it was also during his early days at Otago that Conor met and married Kelly. And so Kelly also, as you all know, has a very strong connection and affiliation with our department and to the university itself. And together they have grown their family, and we welcome Albie and Bonnie, and it's lovely to have them sharing this occasion with us today. Conor's career progression has been rapid, and he quickly progressed up through the various academic ranks, being promoted to senior lecturer above the bar in 2017, associate professor in 2020, and now to professor. In 2019, Professor O'Kane was also appointed director for the Masters of Entrepreneurship program, and this program absolutely thrived under Conor's stewardship. And he continued in this role until his appointment as head of program for the Bachelor of Entrepreneurship in 2024, and that's a role that Conor still holds today. So as the Vice-Chancellor has indicated, promotion to full professor at the University of Otago is not a step taken lightly. You must excel in all three areas: teaching, research and service. And Conor, you have been an overachiever in every area, in all three areas. Your research has had significant impact. Conor's work examines strategy, innovation and entrepreneurial processes, with his main research program focusing on university industry engagement. Conor has been heavily involved with the National Science Challenge for over 8 years, in which he led a longitudinal research project, and currently in a similar vein he is working with the research team which is looking at the research and development tax incentive and evaluating that government mechanism. Conor's research achievements are significant. He has amassed over 100 peer-reviewed outputs. His work has received nearly 2,000 citations, and he holds an H index of 26. He publishes in the very top echelon of academic journals in his research area, and notably he has 3 prestigious publications in research policy: the premier Financial Times Top 50 Journal on Technology and Innovation Policy. Not only, however, is Conor a great researcher, he is also an awesome, great teacher. In his teaching, Conor's developed an innovative curriculum in strategic management and entrepreneurship. His evaluations from students over the past 13 years have been nothing short of phenomenal, consistently receiving near-perfect scores from his teaching of undergraduate students. Conor challenges his students, and in the classroom he engages students through a delivery approach which sees theoretical concepts embedded in interactive case study learning, very reminiscent to the Harvard case method. The skills that Conor fosters and embeds in his students are very important today, and this is because Conor looks to grow his students' entrepreneurial mindset and to build their resilience by providing them with opportunities to experience and deal with rejection. And as academics, some, if not all of us, experience rejection. We know how it feels, and we know how paralysing the effects it can have on our creativity. So I think, Conor, we could all benefit from spending some time in the classroom with you. Professor O'Kane is not only an excellent and very active citizen across the university, but he also contributes to the wider community, especially through his involvement with the entrepreneurship community. So in closing this introduction, I have provided just a snippet of Professor O'Kane's career so far, and I'm sure we will learn much, much more from you tonight, Conor. You epitomise what it means to be a great academic. It has been a real privilege to work alongside of you over the past 14 years, and it is so rewarding to see your commitment to the Management Department, to the Commerce Division and the University of Otago recognised by your receiving one of the highest honours academia offers. So please welcome to the stage Professor Conor O'Kane.
Vice-Chancellor Tanakwe, Deputy Vice-Chancellor, Kia ora, Professor Walton, Kia ora, Professor Edgar Tanakwe. Trono no mátíh go léir agus 100 míle buchas as tacht chuig maltocht an únta anocht. Is mise chun córa go háin agus as Minister Armoí a cúnta Corcaí in Éirindom. Is nó méid an broadú leis seo dom féin agus dom a clán. Tá go leor daoine bhalam a ahant anocht or ní bheic mé tar éis seo a bhaint amach gan mór an cara ó daoine eile. Tásúla gom go miniv sibh tanmh as macaint agus a rís gan buchas libh I bheith láthair. Dena cótó catoa, có chuna córa go háin tu go ingawa, nó éire a hau, na mai harai, kia ora. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for giving up your time and attending my IPL. It's very much appreciated. I opened with a few words in my native tongue of Gaeilge, where I wish you all a good evening. I expressed 100,000 thank yous for coming to my IPL. I mentioned where I am from, that this event was a proud celebration for me and my family. I thanked a lot of people, or I said I'd look forward to thanking a lot of people, and I hoped you enjoyed my talk. Okay, so for my talk, I'm going to start with an overview of places and people that have shaped me, or shaped who I am. I will then speak about my development as a researcher and contributions to the field. Following that, I would like to thank those who have played a part in my life since I moved to New Zealand, and I will close my lecture with some reflections. There is an Irish saying that reads, "Tus maith lana hibre," which means a good start is half the work, and I was very blessed to have a really good start. My yiha, or my home, is Éire, the island of Ireland. It's about 1/3 the size of New Zealand, a growing population of just over 7 million. There are 4 provinces in Ireland: Munster, Leinster, Connacht and Ulster, and 32 counties, which you can see laid out in this map. A peculiar aspect about Ireland is that every county you see laid out here will have its own distinctive Irish accent. Once you cross county borders or even town boundaries, a kilometre down the road, you can hear completely different accents. I often hear about how difficult it is to understand my accent, but believe it or not, us Irish can struggle to understand each other. I come from County Cork, or County Corcaí. I am sure you all know that Irish people can be quite passionate and proud of their homeland. However, much to the frustration of other people in Ireland, this level of emotional attachment can hit absurd levels when it comes to people of Cork. Cork people believe they live in their own republic. We firmly believe we are the real capital, and we tend to emphasise everything great that happens within the county and are slightly disinterested about what happens outside. Within Cork, I come from Minister Armoí, or Fermoy. Fermoy is a mid-sized town that sits on the River Blackwater. It is surrounded by the Nagle and Ballyhoura mountains. Historically, Fermoy was the site of the Fermoy Barracks, a large British Army barracks when Ireland was under British rule. The barracks became the largest military establishment on the island of Ireland during the 1800s, and the town largely built or developed around these facilities. Growing up in Fermoy was pretty idyllic for me. It largely revolved around friends and sport, specifically my obsession with hurling, a native Irish game that goes back some 2,000 years. My home is beside Glenebow Woods and sits directly underneath Corran Cross, 2 special landmark places for me, which I closely associated with my sense of place. I was an 80s baby and come from a family of 6, where I am the second youngest. I have 2 sisters, Maeve and Emer, and 1 brother, Kieran. As siblings, we were close growing up and remain so today, and tonight I would like to thank them for all their support during my career. My parents, Michael and Evelyn, provided us with a very supportive and happy home. They are both originally from Belfast in the north of Ireland. However, they left Belfast due to the Troubles around 1980. My father's mother was originally from West Cork, and as a child he spent a lot of summers in Cork playing hurling and learning the Irish language. He often describes these memories as among the happiest days of his life and a sharp contrast to some of his old early experiences in Belfast. He had a personal vision to live in Cork when he was older, which largely explains how we ended up in the south of Ireland. My father's own father died when he was just 4. However, his mother, or Granny, despite wanting to leave Belfast for Cork, would not leave the north as her 3 kids, including my dad, had access to free education, which was then not available in the south. This early emphasis and prioritisation of education was something my parents carried through to our upbringing. My mother was a qualified nurse and an incredibly strong work ethic. She returned to university after us kids were raised, and with her new qualification, she became a public health nurse and, from what we could see, a pillar of the Fermoy community. My dad, a retired civil engineer with deep expertise and knowledge in all things maths. I spent countless nights with him during my school days working on physics, chemistry and applied maths problems. None of what I achieved through my education and career would be possible without their continuous support. So I would like to thank them tonight for all they have done for me. They emphasise the importance of hard work, humility, discipline, but also having fun. The idea of working hard and playing hard is something I continue to live today. For primary school, I enrolled in an all-Irish school called Gaelscoil Dehida. Gaelscoil translates to Irish school, while Dehida refers to Douglas Hyde, the first president of Ireland and an influential scholar of the Irish language. Being in an Irish Gaelscoil means that you study everything in the Irish language: maths, geography, history, religion, everything aside from English. This meant I had full immersion in the Irish language for the first 8 years of my schooling. When I went to the Gaelscoil, it had just started out. My class of 16 was just the second cohort of the school. There were 25 students in the entire school. As shown in this photo, I remember well a prefab being installed to accommodate a third cohort. Thereafter, the school quickly grew from strength to strength and continues to do so today. Just last year, the school celebrated its 40th anniversary. It is now located in a hugely impressive, purpose-built school with over 350 students of many nationalities. Over time, I have grown to really appreciate how visionary the people who started this school were. Tonight, I would like to acknowledge teachers Sean McGarlt and Martina de Rosta from Gaelscoil Dehida, who provided me with such a strong and meaningful foundation to my education. While Gaeilge is a native language, you can see from this graphic that after many troubled years and episodes of mass immigration, especially the famine, there are now only a pocket of locations around Ireland that are fully Gaeilge speaking. These are called Gaeltacht regions. Somewhat in contradiction to this development, the Irish language remains a compulsory subject in the high school curriculum throughout Ireland. Not everyone supports this, and many question its value for employment and careers. However, I am a big supporter of the importance of native languages, and I am grateful I was grounded in my own from an early age. I fully subscribe to the proverb, Tír gan tanga, tír gan anam, meaning a country without a language, a country without a soul. And I often notice the interesting parallels between the protection of Gaeilge in Ireland and the regeneration of Te Reo Maori in New Zealand. For high school, I went to St. Coleman's College, or Coláiste Culmán in Fermoy. St. Coleman's provided me with an excellent education, and here my interests started to centre around business studies, maths and science. While I performed well academically, for me, high school education was arguably second to the sport of hurling. In Ireland, St. Coleman's would be a renowned hurling college where the game is an obsession. Students attend Coleman's from far and wide to play college in the prestigious Munster and All-Ireland Championships, both of which we won during my time in Coleman's. When I look back, I think it's fair to say that the majority of my high school memories centre on friendships, but also the demanding and rewarding challenges of balancing academic and sporting interests. At tertiary level, I went to University College Cork, some 30 kilometres from my home. I studied business information systems. The degree is a good qualification, very good qualification, and even included a 6-month internship in America, which I did with Johnson & Johnson in New York. But if I'm being honest, it was a bad choice for me. In 1999, with the dot-com era booming, business information systems was trending. I got swept along in the excitement and deviated from my primary interest and strengths. I chose a degree oriented around programming, website development, and hardware, and I quickly came to learn that my brain did not work like that. I struggled in every area of that degree. It was not until the final year of study, when we were exposed to a left-of-field subject called strategic management, that I properly engaged with my tertiary studies. I committed to learning more about strategy and enrolled in a Master's of Corporate Strategy and People Management in the University of Galway. This was a far better fit for me and allowed me to study a wide range of interesting papers on strategy and innovation and change management. I performed well in this Master's, and I was invited back to pursue a PhD in strategic management. My interest in academic research and pursuing a PhD was awoken through the following framework from Pearce and Robbins. It describes a turnaround process where an organisation encounters some years of declining performance that requires attention in order to save it and to regrow. For me, the framework highlighted many interesting things. However, I was most interested by the suggestion that the nature of the causes of the decline largely governed the effectiveness of the turnaround response. More precisely, for firms that decline primarily as a result of external factors such as competition or disruption, a turnaround typically requires entrepreneurial action and some form of strategic turnaround. In contrast, declines from internal causes are more susceptible or typically require a more operating turnaround with efficiency gains. I was interested in this topic as at the time I was working in an organisation that was undergoing significant change. I spent my summers in university working in a company similar to Fonterra. I noticed how a newly appointed CEO could be viewed by saviours by some stakeholders and a horrible hatchet man by others. I also noticed how perception of his effectiveness as a leader was changing over time. Essentially, I noticed that a CEO that might be effective early on in saving a firm may not be the person to grow the firm. These interests morphed into a PhD topic on turnaround leadership. I wanted to study the role of newly appointed leaders during the turnaround process. I examined the literature on turnarounds and developed my own process model. Using this model, I identified 4 companies that had recently appointed new CEOs, and they were at different stages of the turnaround process. One company had just encountered the turnaround situation which I had operationalized. 2 others were at various points in their recovery, but their outcome was not yet assured, and the 4th company had successfully executed a turnaround. I analyzed and compared how each case company executed their strategy. Over the next few years, I published papers on these topics with colleagues. I graduated from my PhD with insight and expertise in 4 areas. The first was on understanding strategic behaviour. The second was an appreciation for the significant strategic change projects in organisations. A third was the role and importance of strategic leadership, and this was all underpinned by expertise in qualitative research. After my PhD, I went working for Pádraig Ó Céadaigh as a PA. Pádraig was a serial entrepreneur and previous winner of Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year Award. He owned a regional airline that he had grown from initially serving tiny remote islands off the coast of Ireland into a regional airline serving UK and Europe. He also had business interests in property, call centres and printing, owning the only Irish language national newspaper in Ireland called Fuincha. Pádraig gave me great exposure across his business operations, and I worked on some interesting projects to put me outside of my comfort zone. However, the most valuable learning for me undoubtedly was working so closely with a highly passionate entrepreneur. I witnessed his unshakable self-belief, his strategic and entrepreneurial thinking, and his incredible relational skills that were so effective in simultaneously disarming and inspiring people in meetings. But I also saw firsthand the stress and draining emotions that come from being a driven entrepreneur, continuously trying to protect and grow what you have. As a side note, some of Pádraig's offices, as in this map demonstrated, were located in Carrow Row, West Galway, one of the Gaeltacht regions I mentioned earlier. After this experience, I took up the opportunity to return to the University of Galway as a postdoctoral researcher. This role allowed me to extend my time in the beautiful and vibrant city of Galway. Galway is known by many as the graveyard of ambition. meaning people will do virtually anything to stay there. At that time, however, Ireland was not in a good place economically after the financial crash and the end of the Celtic Tiger years. There were limited opportunities, particularly in the university sector. My plan was to get international experience that would differentiate me when the country reopened its recruitment borders. I got shortlisted for positions in the UK, Spain and New Zealand, but Otago looked like an interesting opportunity. A very warm welcome and positive experience during a visit for the interview process convinced me to give Dunedin and Otago, as I called it then, a go. And with New Zealand hosting the Rugby World Cup that year, I made the decision to travel south. So just moving on to my research. Okay, so the title of my research, or IPL of course, is Innovation Systems and the Entrepreneurial Turn in Science. So traditionally, we probably all know that the core business of universities is teaching and scientific research. And universities have largely focused on basic as opposed to applied research. This approach to science is underpinned by scientific autonomy and Mertonian norms. So Mertonian norms are as follows: skepticism, which means that scientific claims are open to critical review before acceptance; universalism, that participation in science is open to anyone regardless of personal attributes and affiliations; communism, that discoveries should be shared openly to foster future collaboration and breakthrough; and disinterestedness, meaning scientists should be objective and do research to advance knowledge that benefits science rather than for personal gain. What this means is typically academics who pursue a career in universities are motivated by originality, meaning that their reward for them is when their work is disseminated and they receive awards, scientific priority, or recognition for their work. However, the evolution of systems of innovation continues to challenge the ethos of science and the traditional business models of universities. A model that can help us understand how this is occurring is the triple helix model of innovation. The triple helix examines interactions between universities, industry, and government. Alongside universities' focus on basic research, it is reasonably well understood that the core business of industry is to produce goods and services, and that of government is to be responsible for policy and regulation. The model explains how, as interactions increase between these three entities, they can each evolve and begin to adopt some of the norms and activities of other institutions with whom they interact. It is in this context of these ongoing interactions that the Entrepreneurial University has emerged. Entrepreneurial universities challenge the idea of universities and academia as sitting in an ivory tower. They look to foster innovation and entrepreneurship among faculty and students by promoting greater engagement with industry and communities. In so doing, entrepreneurial universities look to create significant economic, social, and intellectual impact through knowledge transfer. We can understand activities in an entrepreneurial university as ranging from, on the one side of the continuum, those associated with teaching and publication, through various forms of external engagement, to those on the other side of the continuum, which are associated with commercialization. However, the emergence of the entrepreneurial university, in particular those activities associated with the commercial paradigm, has not been without challenges. Some criticisms to summarize from the literature might be that market forces should not be influencing the direction of research. Commercialization is time-consuming and can distract scientists from their core work of publishing. There's risks of knowledge exclusions and secrecy of science that can delay publication and accumulation of knowledge that may actually delay future scientific breakthroughs. And also just that proprietary science is misaligned with the norms and reward structures of scientists' core identity. In contrast to this, other people would argue that actually there is evidence that industry collaboration and patenting has a positive relationship with publication productivity. Commercialization can actually open doors and windows into new interesting questions. The skills learned through commercializing IP can help scientists undertake more impactful research. Commercialization can generate financial resources to support research. There can be a more tangible return to show to industry and society from publicly funded science. And finally, entrepreneurial activity can enhance the reputation of a university, which can lead to higher quality students and faculty. It is within this context that I shaped my research identity. As mentioned previously, for my PhD, I developed insights and expertise across 4 areas. Essentially, what I have done in my career is apply these lenses to the context of academic entrepreneurship. I started to examine the strategic behaviours of entrepreneurial scientists, the impact of strategic change at the micro-foundations of the institution, and strategic leadership within entrepreneurial science teams, underpinned by a qualitative research approach. Let's go through these areas individually. On the first theme of strategic behaviours, a key question I focused on is how scientists compete for grant funding and what are the implications of their competitive approaches. I briefly outlined 2 contributions I have made here. The first is a paper based on data from Ireland on science, engineering and technology PIs. Just for clarity, PIs refers to principal investigator or lead scientist who assemble research teams and successfully acquire research grants to fund their research vision. In this paper, we showed how the strategic posture of scientists, in conjunction with the levels of conformance to funding body requirements, informed 4 categories of strategic behaviour among PIs. This research was important as it showed what behaviours deepened and reinforced existing trajectories and what strategic approaches challenged these domains and opened up new lines of inquiry. In a second paper, using data from New Zealand, we more closely examined the interactions between funding bodies and the science community. We showed that scientists sought to effectively address a portfolio of criteria when competing for grant funding. However, we also showed how hyper-competition for grant funding pushed some scientists to over-address this criteria. Our findings showed there was a tipping point in the competitive approach, beyond which there was a detrimental impact, namely that grant application risks becoming less novel and/or less competitive. Another question I focused on in relation to strategic behaviour is how scientists create impact through their research grant funding. In one paper, led by international colleagues, we first developed a conceptual framework on the role of PIs in the quadruple, not the triple helix. This was a modification on the triple helix that considered the role of communities as well as university, industry, and government. Our argument was that PIs at the micro level were pivotal actors in national innovation systems. We argued that they played a significant role ensuring collective value creation across diverse motives. After this publication, I led a project that supported these arguments with empirical data. This research went beyond our original consideration of value creation and examined how scientists captured value and widened the impact and use of their science across diverse stakeholders, such as government, policymakers, funding body, community end users, and industry. We added to the literature insights on 2 value capture mechanisms in science. First, through boundary spanning, scientists deliver efficient and focused impact for select stakeholders. In contrast, through brokering, these scientists identify, integrate, and carefully balance various interests simultaneously across multiple stakeholder groups. On the second theme, the emergence of the Entrepreneurial University as a strategic project and its impact on the micro-foundation, I was first interested in the extent to which the university created an environment that supported the acquisition and management of external grant funding. In my early postdoc years, I had led the collection and analysis of data that resulted in several publications. Some highlighted the important visionary role of scientists, while others emphasized the managerial and administrative challenges encountered leading teams, labs, and large research programs. I decided to examine this issue in more depth, and we identified an important distinction between funding success at the individual level and an effective funding environment at the institutional level. We detailed a number of challenges and tensions that existed at 3 stages: pre-grant preparation, project implementation, and post-grant translation. An important contribution of this research was highlighting for universities the necessity of developing dedicated policies and support structures tailored to scientists with different levels of experience in research grant funding. Within the same theme, I also started to focus on research commercialization. For instance, I led and contributed to a number of papers that considered challenges, drivers, and institutional settings related to commercialization. One of my most significant contributions, however, to the field is a paper in research policy. Here, we focused on the challenging task technology transfer offices have legitimizing their role on university campuses. For those that don't know, TTOs are commercialization offices that support academics to commercialize their research. In this paper, we theorized the complex institutional environment of entrepreneurial universities, where there is an increasing blurring of the boundary between science and business interests. Within this already complex setting, TTOs are answerable to two key stakeholders, university management and academics. We drew on the theory of optimal distinctiveness and considered that in order for TTOs to develop legitimacy, they needed to simultaneously balance conformance to demonstrate sameness with the traditional university environment, but also some form of distinctiveness to demonstrate they offered something new and valuable in the commercial world. Solely focusing on being similar, i.e. scientific, would unlikely be credible for a TTO. However, on the other hand, solely focus on being different and new, for example, shaping a commercial identity, would also create legitimacy problems as they would simply be unfamiliar. Our study showed how TTOs are shaping a dual identity, but many are ultimately falling short in creating a legitimate identity that is optimally distinct. Our claims are supported by data from all TTOs in New Zealand, Ireland, and a select few TTOs in New York. On this same subject, I also published a sole-authored paper in Technovation that examined interactions between scientists and TTO executives. This was an important topic as both actors are experiencing new role expectations. I carefully mapped out the strength of the role boundaries that typically exist between scientists and TTOs at each stage of the commercialization process and showed how their respective roles were evolving. Specifically, scientists were forward integrating and becoming more active in commercialization duties that were usually the domain of TTOs. And in response, TTOs were modifying their own role identity by backward integrating and becoming more involved in the input and resource accumulation stage of the innovation value chain. My third area of research focus and contribution is strategic leadership of strategic teams, of science teams. In one notable contribution, we tackled head-on the problem that there remained very little known about the role identity of science leaders in the PI role. Based on several years of study in this area by this stage, I led a paper that developed a framework showing how science leaders' identity was made up of 4 roles: science networker, research contractor, project manager, and entrepreneur. Within this, we explained how PIs had a hybrid role identity, part science, part business. We also distinguished between 2 learning mechanisms to show how science leaders transitioned into the role. Learning through experience was utilized to enact responsibilities closely aligned with scientists' core sense of self, while learning through violation was required for roles that were more foreign to a scientist's core identity. Perhaps my strongest research was completed in recent years through the Science for Technological Innovation National Science Challenge. This funding provided me with a remarkable opportunity to do good research that examined how multidisciplinary science teams function and how science leaders manage and frame the innovation process. I was part of a social science team that tracked teams of engineers and physical scientists as they looked to progress science stretch goals into projects that would lead to the commercialization of innovative technologies. What this meant was, over a period of 7 years, I could both observe by sitting in team meetings and also undertake longitudinal interviews to better understand the innovation and academic entrepreneurship process. Within this research, I led 2 publications in the journal Research Policy. In the first, over a 5-year period, we examined how a medical technology team innovating around type 2 diabetes technologies managed and gradually distilled their external engagement with key stakeholders. In this case, we were looking at clinicians, patients, and industry as they designed and developed the technology. We looked at how these external engagements were both informed and shaped by science development. We also showed how the distilling of external engagement allowed the science team leader to effectively redeploy team resources to more innovative exploratory projects. The novelty of the second paper rests on showing how research agendas in science are framed and adapted over time. Comparing two science teams, one on medical technology, the other on additive manufacturing, over 7 years, we identified and critically evaluated two distinct framing mechanisms. One was centralized and led by a visionary star scientist. The other was decentralized, and the research agenda emerged as it was contested by the science team over time. We also discussed the implications of the respective framing mechanisms on team learning and knowledge spillover. These papers are significant, as I have come to learn in doing this research that while there is a lot of research available in the literature on publication and commercialization outcomes in science teams, there remains a genuine lack of understanding on how science teams actually work in practice. In more recent years, I have extended my research to examine additional ecosystem interactions. For example, returning to the topic of TTOs and another fancy diagram, we did a study that showed how a range of macro, meso, and micro factors were influencing the role of TTO officers. And in response, TTO executives were synthesizing and balancing these demands. This was an important contribution, as typically TTOs are understood as intermediaries between university and industry. But what we were showing was they were becoming cross-level brokers within broader national innovation systems. Additionally, to mark the 30-year anniversary of the Small Business Innovation Research Program in the United States, some innovation researchers internationally were invited to evaluate domestic programs and policies that were influenced by SBIR. I led a team that evaluated Callahan Innovation's Technology Incubator Program. Not too dissimilar to SBIR, these incubators were formed to identify and evaluate intellectual property from publicly funded universities and CRIs and private R&D, with the objective of forming deep tech startups with global ambition. Using the OIA process to achieve various policy, cabinet papers, briefs, and reviews, we evaluated the rollout and performance of this program, uncovering and discussing some important findings related to the policy intent. Principal among these findings were that the program's gradual reliance on IP opportunities was from the majority point of view, from the private sources and not public sources. There was a much larger emphasis on creating high-tech startups through funding as opposed to working with already established innovative firms. Intermediaries were using the funding to develop a portfolio of startups as opposed to firms themselves being the applicant. And finally, and probably of greatest significance, there was the rather contentious funding mechanism through a repayable loan requiring 30 to 50% equity conditions to participate in the incubator. Other important entrepreneurial ecosystem contributions included a collaboration on a paper published in Research Policy that was strongly led by my wonderful colleague Annie Zhang. This paper focused on R&D alliances between university and science park firms. It showed how formal interactions in these alliances enhance firms' innovation speed, but positive speed impacts were weakened when the formal interactions were accompanied by frequent informal interactions within the alliance. Also with a collaboration with colleagues from the UK, Italy and Germany, where we coordinated and contributed a 27-chapter book on entrepreneurial ecosystems. Finally, in 2024, I collaborated with MOTU, the Economic and Public Research Institute, and our team was chosen to undertake a 5-year impact evaluation on MB's R&D tax incentive, or the RDTI. This collaboration was excellently led and coordinated by Dr. Tig Ryan Charlton, a former Otago scholar and fellow Irishman. The RDTI is, we came to learn, quite a complex scheme and had significant teething problems in its first few years. I was responsible for the qualitative component. I was responsible for the qualitative component of the evaluation, undertaking research that helped to address the following questions related to: are compliance costs appropriate? Is the scheme being administered effectively? And are taxpayers complying with legal requirements? To do this, I interviewed 84 participants across 67 interviews within 6 months. Interviewees were RDTI personnel in Inland Revenue, MB and Callaghan Innovation, tax advisors from the Big Four consultancy houses, and CEOs, CFOs and innovation managers from 39 firms. We have submitted and presented our report and findings. However, we are not permitted at this point to speak publicly about this report until it is tabled in Parliament. However, we can already see some impact from our December interim findings, with the Prime Minister echoing some of our qualitative findings that highlighted businesses wanted some scheme stability and certainty to assist with R&D investment and planning. Gurren, Bert and Boher, 2 people shorten the road. I would like to now move on to some acknowledgements. At the level of PVC, I would like to acknowledge Professor George Benwell for supporting my initial academic appointment and early development. I would also like to thank Professor Robin Gould for supporting my capability development in innovation and entrepreneurship. I am also grateful to Professor Maria Tyne for encouraging my progression into leadership roles within the school in recent years. I have also had some fantastic head of departments. Alan Gear was the person who collected me at the airport on day 1 and who led my recruitment when I was fresh-faced with little experience. Thank you, Alan. Ian McAndrew is someone I learned a huge amount from, and he served as an invaluable mentor, particularly in the area of teaching, where he was and remains untouchable. I would like to acknowledge Stephen Grover, particularly for guiding on publishing and scholarly impact. A very special thanks to Professor Fiona Edgar for her astute leadership, skills and career support. I developed a lot as an academic under Fiona, and I really appreciate all you have done for me. Also, thank you to Professor Sarah Walton, our new head of department. Thank you for your early encouragement and guidance to date, and I look forward to working more with you in the future. I would also like to acknowledge the support of Sally Davenport, Urs Dallenbach and Katrina Ruckstuhl as leaders of the National Science Challenge. These 3 people always believed in me to do good, impactful research, which I truly appreciate. A special thanks also to my past and present department and divisional colleagues, my co-authors throughout the world, and a special mention to the many professional staff who have been hugely supportive and helpful. There are too many to mention in these categories, but thank you to everyone. There are 4 people, however, I would like to explicitly thank for all they have done for me. James Cunningham, my PhD supervisor, collaborator and friend for nearly 20 years now. Thank you, James, for all your encouragement and generous support and guidance. Vincent Mangemetin, a collaborator in France, who quite simply is the best I know at crafting angles for academic articles. He cuts through much of my elaborate noise and helps me get to the point with my data on what will fly. I have enjoyed many research visits with Vincent. Annie Zhang is without question the hardest working person I know. The phrase I would use for Annie is intellectually generous. She is so clever it defies logic and is just an incredibly kind person. Our offices are side by side, and we have the luxury of testing and teasing ideas and developing research projects, which is invaluable in our line of work. Thank you, Annie. Finally, Jared Haar, simply a publishing and research impact machine. Again, Jared is someone I have regular and deep engagement through WhatsApp voice messages on research ideas, and I have learned a lot from the way he operates and how he positions his research. Is fair cardina or I value friendship. I would also like to acknowledge tonight my good friends, both in Ireland and in New Zealand. I can't put a value on the importance of being able to step away from work, connect socially, and do something fun and different. Be it GA, hurling, football supports in Ireland, my questionable efforts at golf in New Zealand, football or running in New Zealand, or more frequently than is probably advised, meeting for a few pints and having the crack. Thank you to all my friends. Of course, none of this would at all be possible without the support I received from my wife Kelly and our kids Albie and Bonnie. I met Kelly in my early years in New Zealand, and similar to the people in my life in Ireland, Kelly has played a huge role in shaping who I am and in enabling my academic career. She is busy and impressive with her own profession, working in both the university and having her own business. But she is always at hand to support me, and this is especially noticeable when it comes to travel or frantic and extended work hours on research or teaching related activities. Kelly, maybe even more so than Annie, has heard every research idea I ever had. She hears iterations of these ideas and reviews countless figures and introductions. I always know from Kelly's expressions or diplomatic questions whether something makes any sense or has potential. Thank you, Kelly, for all the support, patience, and perhaps most importantly, and those of you who are lucky enough to know Kelly will know, thank you for your humour and the laughs you bring to our family. We laugh a lot. And thank you, Albie and Bonnie, for all the joy and welcome distractions you provide. Is má an scéal an aimsir. Just to wrap up with some final reflections. In strategic management, the core competence of the corporation perspective describes the core competencies as roots of a tree. These roots are often tacit and unseen unique skills and knowledge. They provide the foundation for an organization to grow and succeed. They support the trunk, which represents the core products, the branches, which represent the physical business units, and the leaves and flowers, which represent the end products and in the market that customers see and experience. This perspective essentially highlights that a strong foundation of core competencies provides invaluable nourishment and stability. I have come to learn in preparing this presentation that the research and teaching I carry out and is visible to all is only possible because of the support of colleagues. But my work and interaction with colleagues are only productive because of the strong foundation shaped by my family, friends, and values. I am very fortunate that my research, teaching, and service roles are complementary, with each reinforcing an academic identity in strategy, innovation, and entrepreneurship. I have taught a range of related papers at undergraduate and postgraduate level, and my most significant university service roles have been in the area of entrepreneurship at undergraduate and postgraduate level. I have a lot to be grateful for in this regard at the University of Otago, as it is not always easy to be active in such complementary areas. Just to reinforce this point, the following is an adopted definition of innovation I often share with my students. It states that typically innovation requires some form of invention, but not always, and commercialization, where commercialization involves value proposition development, business model development, and execution. In my teaching, I largely focus on the commercialization component, and in my research, I focus a lot on the challenges inventors experience. This dual focus allows me to bring my research into my teaching and material from my teaching into my research. Overall, this allows me to develop deep insights on the subject of innovation. And it is these very insights which enable me to perform my service roles more confidently, such as our current efforts to develop a novel entrepreneurship degree that cuts across traditional disciplinary boundaries in university. The term Shanachie refers to storytellers of ancient Ireland. They were hugely respected entertainers, offering an invaluable repository of traditions, knowledge, and history. More generally, storytelling is a huge component of Irish culture and how Irish people socialise. We love to talk, share stories and news, and to dissect situations from multiple angles over and over again. Kelly often comments on our trips to Ireland that we have a high threshold for circular conversations. When someone in Ireland asks you what's the crack or any crack, it is simply an open invitation for you to share some news and stories, preferably funny ones. In my personal and family life, storytelling continues to be at the forefront of how I communicate. And on reflection, I think this characteristic is also very prominent in my research. I am largely an inductive researcher, meaning I endeavour to develop new theoretical insights related to processes of innovation. My research is based on the analysis of rich qualitative data. However, at its core, most fundamentally, through my work, I make a contribution to my field by searching for a meaningful and theoretically meaningful story to tell. As a researcher, I believe that connecting with people and analysing their experiences to tell stories is hugely important. Finally, in preparing for this talk, I have had the pleasure of revisiting my youth and what shaped me. But it also forced me to revisit the difficult decision of leaving home and travelling to the other side of the world to pursue a career. There are not many places further away from Cork than Dunedin. As depicted in the sculpture series of Bruno Catalonia, which resonated strongly with me when I came across it, there can be a deep sense of loss and uncertainty when leaving your home, country, culture, and family. Of course, what helps to fill that void is when you meet new people, and I have been very fortunate to do so. Tonight I would like to again acknowledge the many new people I have met in New Zealand over the last 13 years, for being so inclusive and welcoming and helpful, and to provide that social connection that is so essential when you leave what is familiar behind. I have so much to be grateful for in New Zealand. It is a fantastic country and has blessed me with a great career, family, and friends. As I have spoken so much about identity tonight, I thought it was fitting to finish with a reflection on my own hybrid identity. I enjoy reading work by the Irish author John O'Donoghue. In some of his work, he eloquently discusses the inevitable but positive interaction between the ideas of longing and belonging. I have found some peace in applying his words to my own hybrid state, as I learned that longing in life is eternal. But when you are lucky, which I feel I am, this longing for one space can coexist with an enlarged sense of belonging to another. O'Donoghue comments that the restlessness in the human heart will never be finally stilled by any person, project, or place. The longing is eternal. That is what constantly qualifies and enlarges our circle of belonging. The arduous task of being a human is to balance longing and belonging so that they work with and against each other to ensure that all the potential gifts that sleep in the clay of the heart may be awakened and realised in this life. Gurav Mahgud, Mamihi, thank you.
Tēnā koutou katoa, tēnā koe, Vice-Chancellor, tēnā koe, Professor Edgar, tēnā koe, Professor O'Kane, and tēnā koe, Professor Sika Putanu. Tēnā koutou, Kelly, Albie, and Bonnie, well done. I didn't hear too much drawing going on, so you must have been totally enthralled with your dad, which is awesome. Hello everyone who's online as well, and hello especially to Conor's family and his friends that are here today. And welcome everyone. Thank you all very much for coming to this special event. I'm really pleased that we are able to be here online or in person. On behalf of the University, the Business School and the Department of Management, I'd like to extend our warmest thanks to Professor Conor O'Kane for his thoughtful and inspiring inaugural professorial lecture. This evening we were privileged to hear not only an account of an impressive academic journey from Ireland to Aotearoa, New Zealand, but also a deeply personal reflection on the people, places and experiences that have shaped that path. Conor's emphasis on culture and community reminds us that scholarship is not pursued in isolation, but is sustained by relationships, mentorship and shared purpose. Conor's lecture offered us valuable insights into the world of academic entrepreneurship, university industry engagement, and the complex processes that underpin science commercialisation. His research, ranging from the inner workings of science teams to the strategic behaviours of academic leaders, demonstrates both rigour and relevance. It has already made a significant contribution to how we understand innovation in publicly funded research, and it continues to inform policy and practice through ongoing work, such as the evaluation of the government's R&D tax incentive. As head of program for the Bachelor of Entrepreneurship and a dedicated supervisor and mentor, Conor is not only a leading scholar, but also a committed educator and colleague. We are fortunate to have him in our academic community. Conor, thank you for sharing your story. I'm pleased there was lots of story in there. Your scholarship and your reflections with us tonight. We look forward to seeing where your research journey takes you next and continuing that journey alongside you. Ngā mihi nui. Here is a gift on behalf of the university for your talk tonight, and also from your colleagues in the Department of Management. We also have another little gift bag here with something slightly Irish, something slightly from Ōtepoti, and something very professorial. So we hope that you enjoy that. Now there's one other thing that has been slipped in here, and I didn't know about this, but I'm going to have to bring it out. Someone has slipped this in here, and I'm not sure who this is from, but well done. Put that in the bag so we don't see you walking around with it, okay? It might be Rio week, but you know, we've got a decorum to live up to. This includes our formal events for tonight, and I would now like to invite you all to continue to enjoy and celebrate Conor's promotion to Professor with us at the Staff Club. Ka kite anō, ngā mihi nui, and off we go.